So today's a very special edition of I'm Not Selling You Anything. It's a bit of a fireside chat with my two friends, Jon Festejo from Salesbricks and Trenton Truitt, go-to-market leader in B2B SaaS.
You and the team at Salesbricks are just absolutely kicking ass. So thanks for helping a lot of customers. You know, Brian, very fortunate to have started my software career back at PTC, now almost 20 some odd years ago, with the likes of Mark Craney and Adam Aarons. So fortunate to grow up in that organization and learn how to sell on value and the importance of building champions and holding yourself and others accountable to getting things done. So that's a school I grew up in. And I spent some time at a startup company, went to Documentum for about 7 or 8 years, where I kind of came up through the hosepipe from rep to player coach to manager to director to VP. And really there, I got to take all of my PTC sales knowledge and combine it with the most amazing culture that Documentum had. And then from there, I've been very fortunate to be in a number of startup companies and build, a few $1 billion worth of value. But at the end of the day, I'm standing on the shoulders of people like Mark, like Adam, like Jonathan, right? Who have just really helped us all along the way. So, that's me.
Trenton, thank you so much for giving us that little bit about yourself. Jon, over to you. Why don't you tell us how you know Trenton, why we're here?
Yeah, I knew Trenton because he interviewed for a role at a company I used to work at called Signal Effects. Mark Craney was the chief operating officer there. I think we shook hands in the hallway. And then I can't remember, but months later, you kind of tapped me for a role at Apollo GraphQL. I think we worked for a few months there and hit it off, like great relationship. And
yeah,
I told you about this idea of starting a company that makes it easy to buy and sell software. And you were sold. I think we were in a parking lot when we had that conversation. And ever since then, I've been taking your money.
I got to tell you, just Jonathan, you're being humble, right? And what I love about what you brought to the table is you have a lot of grit and hard work about you, and you truly care about the customer, and you truly care about, the customer, both internal, right? Whether it be a CRO, a CEO, finance team, or the external customer. And I didn't invest in Salesbricks. I invested in you, obviously in John Louie. And it was a very easy decision because of your background, your hard work, and the business problem you had have a very intimate understanding of solving. So it's a no-brainer.
Trenton, I thought it was really interesting what you said, that Jon really cares for the customer. And I think this is going to allude to what we're going to be talking about a little bit later on. And you mentioned it just there. You said you met him in a parking lot to discuss the company and what you're building. And that seemed like an in-person close, was it not?
I think, when you deal with customers, the number one thing that very successful sellers do is understand where that buyer is coming from. So what's their pain? What's their experience? What are the problems that they try to solve? And if you somehow align around that, things get easier. Everything goes from uphill to downhill effort. And so, I think Trenton and his background in running sales organizations, building them from the ground up, he understands the problem that we're trying to solve. And, at the end of the day, what Salesbricks is doing is not reinventing the way you buy and sell software, but it's just making everything easier. Because sellers, I believe, in my experience in supporting them and go-to-market ops and sales ops, is their jobs are not easy. There's a million things that they got to go do. And every deal is a snowflake, a unique situation. And organizations, whether it be the CRO, finance, CEO of the company, is asking them to do a lot of things. And their jobs are just naturally hard. And so what Salesbricks is doing is we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just applying a lot of the concepts that live in the B2C world of buying and selling products and services, and applying a lot of the things that work into the B2B world. And so if anybody resonates with that, that's where we have a delightful conversation, and we eventually disrupt in a positive way their businesses and apply a lot of efficiencies and time savings and making things easy for sellers. We wake up every day and we push code every week to move the needle on those types of things that we bring to the market.
I mean, how many salespeople out there get tapped? Hey, what are you going to collect this week for the company? Right. I think Jonathan takes a lot of that off your plate too, and gives finance the tools they need to have those conversations for you earlier. as opposed to you having to chase down that stuff. So you're giving selling time back to the selling organization as a whole, not just sales, but also the CS teams too, right?
I mean, at the end of the day, every sales rep out there is on their own island with a predefined set of tools and processes to go run their book of business. Like they own a territory, they own accounts. But at the end of the day, they're a franchisee. They own that district, that territory, and they have to do everything in their possible will to market, to have conversations, to close deals, to do the finance management. At the end of the day, they're kind of on their own. And most of them get paid when their customers pay, just like a franchise owner, right? They don't make payroll until their customers, pay them. And so if we treat sellers that way and we respect them in that way, and you're inventing a tool or a process or a piece of technology, 80% of the hard work is pretty much done. And the other hard work is just selling and telling your story. So I have that mentality. I think we've instilled that into the organization within Salesbricks. And I think we'll be very successful because of that approach.
Jon, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of a heads up on what we're working on over at Salesbricks. Trenton, we really want to dig in on what those early experiences were like for you, kind of starting in your sales career and how it's different from everything remote. I'm super fascinated. I know there's a lot of people that are fascinated because there's a bit of a shift back to in person. So I'd love to know how you kind of kicked your career off, not over Zoom.
Well, we're going back. I mean, I remember going to my first sales kickoff and walking up to a group of people. And this is all pre-video.
Yeah.
And someone would start talking from just being on conference calls. I go, hey, you're Jon from Houston. Yeah, I'm Jon, right? Because I could hear their voice. Oh, you're Mary from New York. Yeah, I'm Mary. Hey, I'm Trenton. So it was great to have that connection, audible connection, and see the people in person, which was amazing. Now it's all on video, so you recognize everybody instantaneously. Look, my first sales job, if you take Swenson's ice cream and upselling you to a sugar cone, or or ladies' shoes at Nordstrom and upselling you an extra pair of shoes, out of the equation. So my first real sales job in technology was with PTC, and it was like, congratulations, welcome to the company. And my office was San Jose, and some people had certain 3 or 4 blocks of San Jose because they had 1 or 2 named accounts or blocks. And they would tell me, congratulations, welcome to PTC. We're sending you to Fresno. Nothing wrong with Fresno, but Fresno, for those who don't know, is in the middle of California, the breadbasket. And I had the entire Central Valley of California. And so I would drive around the old days in smokestack, actually looking for companies, looking for the smokestacks, manufacturing companies. I would look at want ads in the newspaper for people hiring our competitors. And then I would call into them and try to get a meeting with them to go find out, to go understand what they're building and how they're using that company's technology, how they might, and then go into sales mode.
And in-person discovery.
In person, a lot of times. Oh, what's that building over there? And whip off the freeway. That was kind of the way that it was done. But I learned so much in terms of, I remember doing deals with, large companies like a Parker Hannifin. But I also did a number of deals with small business owners just across their desk. I remember calling on a mold manufacturer. They were making earpieces for Plantronics out of Santa Cruz.
Plantronic, okay.
Plantronics, yeah. And I'm in this warehouse and there's flies landing on me and landing on him. And it's 100 and some odd degrees in this thing. And I'm just across the desk and we're having a great conversation. I'm trying to really, I think what made it so much fun for me in those days was you really had to be intellectually curious about your customers and genuinely care about their business and genuinely care about what their headwinds are. So then you could understand the implications of those headwinds. So then once you understood those, then you could put a value to solving those problems, those headwinds, to then justify your technology. And I remember these are the days where your technology is $15,000 to $25,000 a seat, then you're going to go buy a $15,000 to $20,000 computer to run the damn thing, right? So these are These are big decisions, and you have to go train on it. This is a complete shift from 2D CAD to 3D models.
Right.
Big shift for people.
You also had to tell them, like, you got to get rid of that warehouse with all those desks.
Yeah, you do.
Right.
And all those people you employ in a small town, like, we can help you make better use of those people, right?
Trent, it's interesting that you mentioned how meeting people in person, obviously the flies, I see the flies. You painted such a picture. But I think what I pulled from it, and Jon, agree, if maybe you disagree or agree, but it's sort of like you can't really fake it in person. You truly have to care about what they're doing. Because I feel like we hear this. This is not the first time we've heard that you really got to care what your customer, what their headwinds are, and what, look down the road for them, and really position a solution that's going to help them based off these things that you've learned. I feel like in person, you can't fake that. Over remote, you kind of can say you do it, but when you're in person, you're really looking at someone in the eyes, you're shaking their hand, and you really know if the person that's trying to sell me something really means it or not. Jon, what do you think?
I agree with you. And I think you mentioned it really, really clearly about you can't fake it in person. Also, you can't optimize for metrics also when you're going door to door. So when you're not optimizing for how many calls did you take a day or how many meetings did you have, it was more about how many genuine conversations did you have? What did you learn about their business and how does that align to the technology you're selling? For me, as a sales rep for the company I started and working with investors as well, like, we're always optimizing for meetings and meetings booked and how many meetings do you have a day. And when you're optimizing for that, you're optimizing for volume versus like going really deep in understanding their business. And when you actually go deep into the business and you kind of live like as if you were an employee there, and you're living vicariously through their stories and like what's their pain, it really builds that trust within the person you're having a conversation with. They want to champion you into the right people. They want to be involved in the process. You don't kind of get that when you're optimizing for 5-6 meetings a day. And I'm assuming, Trenton, you have probably less slip deals because the guy shook you, or the lady shook your hand, and you saw each other eye to eye, and you're like, we're going to go do this together. And it's really hard for them to just ghost you. I'm not sure if that's something that you thought about, or if there's any correlation, but I would think
we've all been ghosted for sure. And even the in-person stuff, it does make it more difficult, but I do think that you're building a genuine relationship. Also, there's when you go into a company, and maybe those of you out in the sales world can identify with this. For me, as soon as I walk in that door, I have an immediate temperature of the company. I can just feel, you can feel things. I've walked into so many buildings over the years, you just get this Spidey sense, and you're talking to the front desk. And the old days you had to sign in, right? And we're doing proof of concepts. I could see all my competitors, right? Who came in where, what are they doing? You chat everyone up, and you're meeting, on the way to go sit down in your conference room, you're looking at things, you're picking up all these different signals. You're looking at whiteboards that have information on it, right? You're talking to people that maybe you've met in the past, and you're just gathering more and more and more data, quite frankly. Look, at the end of the day, customers want to buy from people that understand their business. That's what they want. They want to know that Jonathan knows my business before I write a check to him. And when you do that, and you're showing up on site, and you're asking the right questions, and you're genuine, you don't, if you're not intellectually curious, you can't fake it. But if you're genuinely intellectually curious about their business and what their challenges are, then now all of a sudden you're selling a solution. You're not selling a SKU. And your trust level is high, as it should be on both sides, both of them trusting us to provide a great solution, but also us trusting them that when they say they're going to do something, like buy your software by a certain date, they actually are on track to do that. There's a social contract there that exists.
And it seems like it's a contract that can more easily be broken if it's a relationship that was built just on a screen.
I think so. Look, we've all sold a lot of software just through the screen, and it is tough. And I think it takes a little bit longer to build those relationships. But we also all of us and through COVID had something in common, right? We couldn't go to work. We had that in common. We were all locked up. We had that in common. So you had something immediately to talk to somebody about. Hey, how are you doing? What's happening in your city, Brian? Well, in Texas, is there a pandemic in Texas? Right. So, I mean, you had different conversation points you could find quickly, but it takes time, right? And when people are selling to me, I want to get to know them a little bit before they just jump into whatever they're selling, right? And to build that rapport.
Jon, you'd mentioned how when you go to these, when you go on site, is this something that you've worked on with the prospect beforehand, or do you just show up and say, hey, I'm in town for a couple days? I just sort of see if you approached me with the, hey, I'm in Austin for a couple days, let's talk about what your problems are, instead of, hey, I'm planning to go to Austin for 3 days. Are you open to it? So I don't know if there's nuance there. How do you feel about it? You just show up, or you got to give someone the heads up?
Yeah, it's a good question. It really, you have to read the person.
Okay.
There's some people who are social butterflies and it's an excuse for them to get out of the house. And there's some people who are just genuinely busy, and you have to like sniff for that. And depending on what you've learned, you can offer scenarios where like, let's not talk about business, let's grab coffee and then naturally we'll talk about, each other's businesses. And there's some people who are like, let's have a few meetings first. And if things make sense, like let's actually start to build a relationship before we partner together. So it's a mix. You have to understand who you're talking to as well. There's some scenarios where we do sell to the engineers of the world, and they're the founders, and it's not always easy for them to come out of the house and socialize. And their role is also a huge factor of how you engage with them.
Trent, what are your thoughts? You give them the heads up back in the day, or would you kind of just say, hey, I happen to be in town?
Both. Absolutely both, depending on where I was in a quarter and everything else, right? I remember sitting in plenty of lobbies at the end of the quarter, like not leaving until we had either an answer or a signed contract.
This is not made up.
No,
it's one of these two answers.
Legitimately sit there and tell them, like, listen, hey, it's Trenton. Listen, I'm in the lobby, and I'm going to be here until we have a chance to talk today. Would be great to see you. Right. And it paid off more times than it didn't. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I was about to ask, like, how many of those really turned up into either quota saving, quarter saving, or just significant deals that maybe grew?
If you do it right and you're sitting in the lobby at the end of the quarter, it should not be a surprise to your champion, right? We've been working on this for months to have this done by X date. And the X date's not always June 30th. The X date's like, June 15th or something, right? And so you have this time that's slipped. And the fact you're sitting there wanting to get this done should not be a surprise to anybody. And when you do that and you're showing commitment to the customer, most of the time they respect it. Most of the time they respect it. Or they just haven't wanted to tell you no yet. And it's hard for people to tell. Sometimes you find these people that just don't want to tell you no.
Right.
And it's extremely valuable, right? Like, I'd rather tell Cranny, 2 months ahead of time that it's not going to close in the last day of the quarter, right? So there's pressure on all the directors and reps and VPs on these deals as well. And that pressure just builds. And so, yeah, I think also if you're sitting there at the end of the quarter and you've done it right, you've not taken any shortcuts, you've been communicative to your champions, you've earned the right to give me an answer.
Yeah.
And it's not like good news, bad news. It's just news. Just give me the news. Is it no, because we don't have the economic buyer is gone today? Okay, I can deal with, let's track him or her down. Is it no, because you decide to go with a competitor? Let's talk about that. Right. Or is it, yes, I've just been so busy, I just got to sign the damn thing.
So what I want to shift over to is kind of how remote work came through a little bit and disrupted that. So my question to Trenton is, how did that shift to remote work change your sales strategies? Again, you've been around, we started with PTC, with the in-person, kind of you're sitting there at the end of the quarter, you want to hear yes or no. How did all of a sudden, we're not going in and meeting anyone in person, we have to do this over Zoom, over whatever tool you're using. How did that shift change your strategies?
I got to tell you, it was scary. I mean, if you're looking back on it and you put yourself back in those shoes, it was really scary about what's happening in the world, your own health, your family's health. And I guess the good news is we're all of us in the world, we're kind of united on this, but it was nerve-wracking and you were forced to do it. The good news was nobody was going to the office. So it's not like, oh, my company won't let me go. It was like, nobody can go. And everyone was forced into this remote world. And I also found that people were not only scared for their health, but they were scared for their jobs. I mean, people were genuinely frightened. And so there was a need to continue to be productive, if you will. Like the people had to show productivity. They wanted to show productivity as they were working from home. And that, yeah, they could still get projects done. And so thank you, PTC, for the basics that I've been fortunate to pass on to a lot of people about, your deal discipline and selling on value and not missing any steps and, medic and medpick and all that stuff. It's the real basics that come through in hard times like that. You cannot take any shortcuts. If there were shortcuts, believe me, all of us PTC people would have done them.
Wait, it would have found them.
We would have hacked that. Believe me, there's just no shortcuts to the basics of selling on value.
It's funny you say that it's almost like the question was, how did it change your sales strategies? And it really didn't, in a sense. What it did was it made you dig back to what you knew and almost like double down.
Yeah, it's the push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, yep. Right? And getting wider was a little bit more difficult at times, right? And so trying to bring in additional people to the conversation was always a little tricky, right? And then you have 7 people on a Zoom and trying to get them to, okay, who are they? Are they a naysayer? Are they positive?
Yeah, I see.
Negative?
Okay.
Are they a coach, champion? Are they distractor? Trying to pick those things up and trying to read body language and listen. That's why I wear a headset with two, because I have to really listen to these conversations, right?
You really got to get in there.
I know. I now don't have the luxury of body language necessarily that you normally can read in these conversations. So it was tough. I wish I had a magic answer for you.
Yeah.
But, it really came down to the basics for us.
How about you, Jon? What changed for you?
Yeah, I think, targeting accounts based on location and being able to get everybody in the same room is it's very difficult from a prospecting perspective. So it's really hard for us to kind of go into a company and ask them to meet us in person because, one the champion might be in a different country or a different state, and then the CEO might be in a different part of the world as well. And it's really hard for us to kind of champion these like in-person conversations and sales cycles. So everybody, that we sell to also is in the same playing field. They're prospecting to companies that are fully remote. So you don't get that opportunity, frequently. But what it does is it also, puts everybody in the same playing field. And I think a lot of technology has changed and helped us, survive this kind of new way of selling. The way that we prospect is changing. But yeah, we're still actually figuring it out at Salesbricks. And I'm sure a lot of our companies in the same kind of stage as us is figuring it out. But ultimately, it's going back to the basics, as Trenton said, is understanding the company you're engaged with, being very empathetic to the problems that exist and how your product, your technology can solve that. But just being very genuinely curious about their business is at the end of the day a huge competitive advantage.
I think that was very important what you'd mentioned about how it became more difficult. Trenton started it by saying going wide is becoming a little bit more difficult. And then Jon added to it by saying there's people in different time zones and you're literally never going to get everyone in the same room. You're going wide. You've got 9 people in there. You're not quite sure who the decision maker is. What did you have to adapt to be able to wrangle all that?
I mean, you got to drive the boat. You can't let the boat drive you, right? So the customer thinks they have a buying process. You have to understand that, but you also have to interject what you believe the buying process should be based on your strengths for your technology or the weaknesses of your competition. So trust it, verify is really important, right, Brian? So if you and Jon are both on the decision committee here, I want to meet with you both separately to understand, okay, walk me through, Brian, your criteria. Why is it important to you? What's it mean if we solve it, et cetera, et cetera. Jonathan, what's your criteria? Why is it important you solve? What's it mean if we solve it? And trying to put together a picture there. And then when you bring people together, the audience is really important. As an example, if you're going to be doing a demo, I don't want to have all the business people with the tech people on the same demo, because at any one time, we're going to lose half the audience.
Right.
If I'm talking to the business owners like yourself, Brian, then that's great and you'll get it. But Jonathan's just totally tuned out.
Right. You're talking top down at that point with the end users. It's a completely different conversation. Is that
right? Right. And then same with the technical team. So you have to, understand who plays what role, understand each and every one of their individual issues or political wins or whatever that might be. And then you have to bring it together at the right time with the right message. So maybe you do almost 3 demonstrations, right? So I'm talking to the business team, then I'm talking to the technical team. Okay, everyone questions, and then we bring it together as one. And remote, the reality is you can cover a lot more ground faster being remote, which is great. And so you can actually speak to more people. It just, because you're not getting on airplanes, which is nice, right? And hopefully building more champions, and it goes a long way.
So you can get out there, you can meet the people, but like you'd alluded to earlier, and Jon alluded to earlier, is the impact of that meeting that might feel a little bit more different. It seems like more swings are required.
Absolutely. I think that's why sales cycles are elongating too. You see that in the industry too, but
yeah, like you just said, you're meeting with all of these people. Those meetings you can do them all in one day or over a course of a week, but you're still meeting with individual people wherever they may be.
You have to learn the business, and you have to understand what their challenges are, so you can aggregate the right solution set for sure.
Jon, when you have these remote, you have a whole team. I know you're doing the sales gig. That's what you should be doing. At the stage where the company is. What happens when you have those? There's a stalemate. There's a ghosting situation where you've spoken to. It looked like the buying committee. There's 5 people on the call, and it looks like you've addressed everyone's concerned, the top-down concerns, the end user concerns, the tech concerns, and then you just never hear back. Is that when Jon says, "I might just show up"?
That's definitely a strategy I always think about, which probably happens in the PTC days. Is building that champion. So, who in that organization, behind the scenes when you're not looking, is actually moving the needle for you in your sales cycle? So they're the ones who are putting pressure on the buying committee to make a decision, to be transparent about, the truth behind, is the product, working out or not.
Yeah.
Those are very important. And just today, like, one of my teammate, Lewis, he built a champion for the last couple of weeks, and now he's, harvesting the benefits of it. So he's texting, and they're back channeling, they're asking feedback from, how did your CEO take that demo? What's his gut feeling? What's his, how fast can he move? And we're starting to put pressure on our champion. And for that purpose, like, that does move the needle on deals when sometimes things are stale.
That's a great example with the back channel. They're texting. The more casual conversations happen, maybe on a quick phone call, not a Zoom, or maybe not an email, maybe a text. Trenton, was any of that part of the game as far as like, listen, we've had text for a while now, So between having to meet in person and having the Zoom, did you have those kind of back channel conversations that move those deals along as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I should have mentioned this earlier, right? That when you're meeting in person, it's the hallway conversations when your champion comes to get you at the door and walk you to the conference room. That 2 or 3 minutes is invaluable, because you're asking some very pointed questions. Then you have the meeting, and of course they always go well and everybody loves you, right? But then afterwards, talking to your champion again in the hallway, or pulling the EB aside in the hallway. Hey, Jon, this is what I heard. Is this translating for you of what it means to the business, or what's important to you? Oh yeah. The pre and the post conversations are the most valuable. I mean, I remember when I was at PagerDuty, and Andreessen Horowitz has an amazing executive briefing center. And they would have the CIOs, CTOs of the world's largest companies come down, and they would parade a dozen of Andreessen Horowitz portfolio companies through to these executive staffs. And the CTO and CIO of Pepsi would bring, 15 people to the meeting, right? And they have their entire exec staff around the table. I was in one meeting where it was myself, the PagerDuty rep, one person from Microsoft, and Satya. 4 of us, right? This is the type of, meetings we're having. What would happen was the visiting execs would kick off the day with an overview of their business and an overview of what they're working on. And then there'd be a little break, and then you'd start the round robins of the companies coming through. The smart companies, the smart reps would all go to that first meeting. Even if your presentation was 4 hours later, you would go to that meeting. Why? Because now you've heard from them what they're working on, what's important to them, right? What some of their big projects are. But guess what? You walk in there, you're like, hey, John, nice to meet you. Hey, hey, Johnny, nice to meet you. Hey, Sally, nice to meet you. And now I walk in 4 hours later. Hey, great to see you all again. How's the day going? And you're building a relationship with these people. Great to see you all again. Let me tell you what we do at PagerDuty, how it's going to relate back to some of the projects you're working on. Does that make sense? You'd break for lunch and everyone would walk outside and there'd be like, nice lunch there. And you could talk to these people.
Because you've done it. You've gone there earlier. And it's not just like, I'll meet them when I show up.
You don't get that on Zoom. You show up, you ask for questions, you do your thing, and you hang up. Then you call your champion back if you can't, right? You don't have a chance to have those one-on-ones, which are so incredibly valuable.
I feel like the champion is more prone to picking up that phone if they'd seen you a couple times at that pitch, at the water cooler. Maybe you had a little bite to lunch before your demo or whatever the pitch was. I think that's what you're saying.
Human. People are human.
John, can you share something very specific about a deal that you might have had to show up in person to go close recently?
Yeah, I typically, if that's happening, I usually, we have how we sell our product, we get access to the founders or CEOs. So they're the ones who usually have to write the checks and sign the contract. So there was this one time where I actually scheduled a dinner on my quarter end. So if they sign the contract before the meeting, great, we're celebrating with a dinner. If they haven't, it's a compelling reason for them to go do that. It could be very awkward for me to take them out to a nice dinner and just them twiddling their thumbs and not actually signing the contract. So it's kind of an insurance policy. It's a great strategy. And it was a scenario where they said they were way too early for something like Salesbricks. They had a process that was working currently. It wasn't that painful. They're not solving for things a year down the line. They built trust with me, and they loved the fact that I worked at a bunch of A16Z companies running, operations for the organization, and they took a bet on me. They didn't, like what Trenton mentioned earlier, they didn't invest in Salesbricks. They invested in Jon. And for that reason, we closed the deal, and we've been providing so much positive impact in their business. They're closing deals like, I don't know, like three logos a week. And we're tied to the hip right now. So, I did mention to you, I was in the Philippines a couple months ago, and I hung out at a restaurant in the first floor of a nice hotel. I was having a recruiting lunch with a candidate. And, I had the opportunity to listen in to a few conversations on my left and my right. And it was exactly what Trenton did at PTC. It was a seller asking a bunch of questions about the CIO's business and initiatives for the year and listening first. And then, towards the end of lunch, he was talking about his product, his company, the company culture, how it aligns. And I thought to myself, gosh, there's a lot of founders in my stage and future founders that have yet to start their company, not able to have that muscle of in person and the strategies around in person. And when they become an international business, they're going to have to learn a lot of new things real quick to be successful. And the fact of the matter, in my observations, is the way that Trenton grew up and sold software back in the 90s, 2000s, that's the hardest way to sell, but it's the best way to sell. Learning how to sell on Zoom and remotely, it's going to be a little bit difficult, but it's going to be something that you learn quickly. So my observations is, the new generation of sellers are going to have a huge disadvantage as they go international and as their competitors are starting to go in person as well. But yeah, those are the types of things I've been thinking about often in my my CEO daily tasks.
I'm going to jump on a couple of things here too. I think that I've always said like the product leaders need to have as many frequent flyer miles as I do.
Oh,
right. So the product leaders need to be in these meetings as well to help build products. Number one. And the product leaders need to be either on the Zoom calls or with customers. That jumped out to me. The second thing is diagnose and then prescribe. So a lot of what I want to help avoid are the new people coming into sales, people earlier in their careers.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting the coaching and mentoring that they need because they're all working alone in their homes. They're not building that teamwork, the camaraderie, the drilling, all the hard work to become the best sellers they possibly can be. And so I'm afraid they're not going to learn how to do all the diagnostics before they prescribe, so to speak, right? And really be coached and mentored. And that's probably a whole other podcast for you, quite frankly, but because it's harder to hire, it's harder to onboard, it's harder to teach, it's harder to get people emotional buy-in on your culture when they've never seen or tasted or felt your culture, right? They've never seen that or felt it. And so, I have faith in America. I have faith in young Americans to go out there and sell, but they have to have the grit. They have to have the discipline to go execute on that. And I think part of that is incumbent on the companies you're working for. So I see more and more companies that are saying, look, the sales teams are going to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that too. A lot of benefit. So I took you off track a little bit, Brian, but that was going through my mind.
No, it was great. Jon, Trenton, thank you so much for those thoughtful answers. I think it's going to be useful for everyone. Someone who's been in the profession for a while, maybe your Mark Crannies, Adam Aarons of the world might be listening, or for the folks that are brand new to the industry. Maybe they want to pop on and realize that it's not just everything over Zoom, and maybe they might want to reconsider that all remote role and say, maybe I might go in the office a couple days a week just to kind of get that sort of that tribal knowledge that really can't get transferred any other way. So again, guys, thank you so much. This was really great, and hopefully we'll catch each other again soon.
Brian, thanks for everything. Jonathan, keep going, my man. Congratulations on all your growth.
Thanks, Brian. Great stuff.